tēnā tātou katoa. Nā o mai haere mai ki te rōpū whakakotahi whenua o Aotearoa, ko Peter Nichols toko ingoa. Selamat datang kepada bertemu ini, khususnya dengan Bapak Duta Besar dari Indonesia dan juga Duta Besar dari Malaysia. I extend a very warm welcome to you all this evening to this meeting of the Wellington branch of the United Nations Association of New Zealand. Tonight we will hear both from the Indonesian ambassador and the Malaysian High Commissioner about their country's perspectives of the United Nations, their country's involvement, and we may well touch on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And MFAT diplomat James Waite will then talk to us about New Zealand's international involvement and partnership with the ASEAN countries, but focusing, of course, on Indonesia and on Malaysia. But firstly, some housekeeping. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold, and just keep an eye out for the lights or anything else that might fall down. Parliament buildings, however, is amongst one of the most safest in the country, as there are base isolators here. And if you haven't been to Parliament before and seen how that works with the building built on rubber stands to enable the wobbling to occur, then it's quite impressive, and I would recommend that to you. In the event of a fire or any other alarm, follow the instructions of parliamentary staff and especially the very friendly security team who will guide you to the nearest assembly point. Fire exits are at on the side of the building, and essentially we will leave the way that we have come in, but follow the instructions of the staff. Toilets are back out through the main door and just around the corner from the select committee room if you need those. It's appropriate to open these meetings with a whakatauki or a proverb, and I would like to start with this one. Mā te rongo ka mohio, mā te mohio ka marama, mā te marama ka mātou, mā te mātou ka ora ai te iwi. And I will leave you in suspense and do the translation of that at the end of the meeting, so you'll now have to stay and hear us all the way through. I shall, the panelists will speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will have a Q&A opportunity. Our first speaker is His Excellency Mr. Tantowi Yahya, Ambassador to New Zealand, Samoa and Tonga, as well as I recall, newly appointed position of Indonesia's roving ambassador to the Pacific. He is also a famous Indonesian TV music show personality, a recording artist in country music, having produced 8 albums, including Keep It Country, Goin' Country, and Country Road.
All country.
You're into that music.
All country.
All country. I highly commend you listening to those. He's very well known throughout Indonesia as a TV host, and you may well recognize these programs from a European perspective, but a TV host of Deal or No Deal, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Who Doesn't, and Gita Remaja. He has also had a significant political career as a former Member of Parliament for South Sumatra from 2009 to 2014, and a credible time also as MP in Jakarta 2014 to 2017. Your Excellency, I now invite you to address us.
Thank you, Peter. Kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I would like to begin by addressing the distinguished speakers, my colleague, High Commissioner of Malaysia, Izzah Wong Choo, and then my counterpart from Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, James Waite, and of course, the one and only Peter Nichols, the presidents of the United Nations Associations, New Zealand. Thank you very much, Peter, for inviting me to this seminar and giving me opportunity to share with you all the Indonesia's progress towards the full realizations of Sustainable Development Goals, which today opened up as Agenda 2030. But before I begin my presentations, I would like to firstly apologize for not being able to stand until the end of our seminar due to an event which is taking place at the embassy, which sadly cannot be cancelled or postponed. But nevertheless, I have prepared slide presentations which consist of the data that reflects our challenges and also our success in dealing with not COVID-19, but in dealing with the SDGs. And the data that I would like to present to you as you see it is sourced from our 2019 annual voluntary review report. So basically it's very updated, and it shows you the actions and developments that have been taken by Indonesia and the challenges that we have. And of course, I would like to touch the challenges that our government is facing amidst the pandemic COVID-19. I will leave the presentations all with you, but due to the very limited times that we have today, I will only pick some of those. And in case some of you are very interested in having those presentations, simply contact our embassy and we are more than pleased and happy to send the presentations to you all. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by giving you a very brief introductions to Indonesia, especially the details which I think very relevant to our topic today. So as you know it, Indonesia today is considered one of the most dynamic countries in the world. So with over 270 million people called Indonesia home, so Indonesia now is the fourth largest populations after China, India, and the United States. And the 270 million people, they live all across the archipelago, from the western tip of archipelago to the northern tip of the eastern tip archipelago. They are very diverse. They are from 633 ethnic groups and speaking more than 1,300 languages and dialects. So that shows you how complicated this country is. So out of the 270 million people, 49% of which are women, and men accounts 51% of the total populations. And from that total population, almost one third of the population are children, or accounts the number of nearly 90 million people. So, ladies and gentlemen, that shows you how complicated Indonesia is, and that shows you also the challenges and a lot of homeworks that have to be done by our government when dealing with the realizations of SDGs. And as you understand as well, Indonesia is the third largest democracy after India and the United States. So post-amendment, the fourth amendment of our constitutions, our democracy becomes more vibrant, and it's signaled by the more power given to the parliament, and then more freedom given to the media and the press, and more interactions with the civil society. So that shows you how challenging it is for the government when dealing with making policies in relations with the SDGs. So more and more stakeholders that have to be consulted by our governments when it comes to making policy on SDGs. But on the other side, Indonesia is benefited by being the largest economy in Southeast Asia by GDP and the sixth largest in the world. It means that theoretically, arguably, Indonesia has more resources and has more financial strength in our effort to realize our commitments of in the SDGs. So next slide. So ladies and gentlemen, this is very interesting. Despite all of the flowery informations that I've just given you, so between 2014 and 2018, Indonesia's GDP grew consistently by 5%. And in the same period, unemployment rate decreased and 9.38 million jobs were created. Female employment rate were dropped from 6.4% to 5.3%. Property rate decreased from 11.25% to 9.8%. Our Gini ratio, which shows the inequality of wealth, decreased from 0.414 to 0.384. So, and from 2014 to 2017, financial inclusions, or the availability and equal accessibility for all businesses and individuals to financial services increased from 36% to 49%. In 2015, 2018, attendance rate, or the percentage of students enrollment at primary education, increased from 79.4% to 83%. The attendance rate of secondary increased from 91% to 90.50%. The attendance rate of high school increased from 78.2% to 80.68%. The attendance rate at university increased from 25.26% to 30.19%. And this is very interesting. Gender inequality at all levels is almost non-existent, while access to primary and secondary school is almost equal among all income groups. Almost half of Indonesian youth participate in formal and non-formal educations. Democracy index increased from 0.9% in 2016, increased to 72% in 2017. Anti-corruption behavior index increased from 3.59% in 2015 to 3.6% in 2018. And in 2015 to 2018, approximately 45,000 legal aid and approximately 83,000 non-litigation activities were provided for the poor. And what happened to the sustaining climate actions and managing disaster? We have also interesting data to share with you. Low carbon development or economic strategies that encompass low emissions and economic growth that is resilient to climate change has been part of our national development planning agenda. During 2010-2017, greenhouse gases emission has been reduced by 22.5% from 13 billion tons CO2e. And we also managed to reduce its intensity by 27% from 560 ton to CO2e per billion. And between 2010 to 2017, enhanced disaster management has reduced the number of death and missing persons. It has also decreased economic loss by 7 trillion rupiah. The disaster risk index has been reduced by 23.97% in 2018. The next point is the innovative development financing. Our government has created various financial instruments, including green sukuk, blended finance, Islamic charity, and social impact investment. These have leveraged resource flows from both public and private sources for SDG financing. Our government has also established SDGs financing hub to reduce financing gaps and implement innovative financing sources through multi-stakeholders collaborations. And the last point of this slide is about the broad and inclusive national process and strategic partnerships building. It means that Parliament is involved since early stage of SDGs conceptualizations, whereas the Supreme Audit Board is involved in auditing SDGs preparations and implementations. When I was in the parliament about 5 years back, I was the secretary of the committee of the SDGs. So we work hand in hand. We managed to have meeting almost every month with the government in making the concepts of from MDGs to the SDGs. There are 9 SDG centers that have been placed in prominent national universities, and South-South and triangular cooperation have been strengthened with more partner countries and the nexus between peace, humanitarian assistance, and developments. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to share with you in this limited time, Indonesia's best practices. Indonesia's commitment to attain the SDGs is reflected in our continuous efforts and policies. And these are Indonesia's best practices, which have become models, namely mainstreaming SDGs into National Development Plan. So far, SDGs have been incorporated in the midterm plan for 2015-2019 and 2020 to 2024 in all development aspects. And then creating an enabling environment by adopting national regulations, using a multi-stakeholders approach, and raising awareness, in particular among the youths, through platforms like SDG centers in various universities. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the sheer number and diversity of the Indonesian populations poses challenges to the government and in realizing the SDGs. In general, the challenges are less than desirable universal access, equal opportunity, and equal treatment for all. For instance, ladies and gentlemen, although the government has regulated standards for public services, there are still numerous agencies at the central and regional level whose public services are still below the national standard. And then in implementing good governance, some of the challenges include less of adequate, up-to-date and aggregate population data, as well as corruption. In education sector, we have yet to ensure that all teachers possess qualifications up to national standard and schools have sufficient education facilities. So as a country that is prone to natural disasters, we have regulated and installed national disaster preparedness measures. The challenge comes with the still growing number of populations, which results in ever-growing need to expand the measures. Next slide. So, ladies and gentlemen, following the unfortunate happenstance of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Indonesian government, together with UNDP, has made analysis and calculations of the impact of the pandemic to SDGs. As you understand, there is no single country in the world which is free from COVID-19. So Indonesia is one of the countries in the world that have been hard hit by COVID-19. Our economy is stagnant, not to say experience hibernations, tourism industry stops, and we have another issue that we have. It's not easy to contain people in house and stay at homes. It's never easy for Indonesia to implement what you call lockdown. We are dealing with people that have to leave home. They have to be out of home for economic reasons. So those are some issues which you hear people in New Zealand do not really experience them. And I'm so fortunate during the pandemic, me and my family live in one of the safest places on earth. Thank you, God. So there are so many impacts, but I only select the impacts which are very relevant to our effort to achieve the SDGs. So the first one, ladies and gentlemen, is the job loss and poverty increase. I think it happens also in New Zealand. We experience a great number of job loss and our poverty increase due to economic reasons. And then interruptions of food productions and distributions. And then infected populations, like breakdown of health facilities, obstructions of educations, like school closure, scarcity of communications infrastructures. Up until now, the schools in Indonesia are not open yet. We are implementing a regional lockdown, so to speak. So the lockdown is not implemented nationally, but it's implemented in the most affected provinces. Of course, violence against women and unemployment, interruptions in distribution and access to clean water. It has been a great issue also in Indonesia. Interruption in distribution and access to energy, halt or hibernations of economic activities, unemployment and economic contractions, and then urban population's density, increase COVID-19 vulnerability. It's a country with 270 million living in 34 provinces, and we have so many borders to take care. So if one province is COVID-free, then people, we cannot stop people from crossing the borders. Then the new infection is taking place. And the climate actions, commitment, and resources reallocated to COVID-19 measures. So maybe you've heard that Indonesia has a plan to remove our capitals, because our current capital is no longer ideal as a capital. It's overpopulated. It's a province which is ideal for 6 million people, but as a matter of fact, it is now inhabited by more than 10 million people. So we have prepared a land as the new capital. We have prepared the budget, but then everything is postponed. Some of the budgets which are prepared for the new capital are now being used for COVID-19. Next slide. Next slide. I'll make it very fast. Now, the last slide shows you our development plan in line with SDGs and in support of socio-economic recovery. So number one, as you saw it, we enhance now quality and competitive human resources. Number two, we enhance character building. And number three is economic resilience and quality growth. And then quality in development. The fifth step is infrastructures for economic and development and basic services. And of course, political stability and security and public services transformations. And number seven is environment. So those are the steps which are prepared and taken by Indonesia to overcome the COVID-19, which helps the process of achieving the SDGs. But nevertheless, we never ran away from our commitment to achieve all the goals of SDGs, because as you understand, SDGs for a country is the commitment of that country to the world. So there is no way to get rid of it. So we have to fulfill no matter what. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll leave all the presentations to you, to Peter, for you who are interested in having all this. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Bapak Duta Besar. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the High Commissioner of Malaysia to New Zealand, Her Excellency Nur Izzah Wong Mi Choo. She has held positions with Malaysia's Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she has also had a posting to China during that time. She has a Master of Arts in Social Sciences from the National University of Malaysia and is a postgraduate in International Relations Studies from Tsinghua University in Beijing. Your Excellency, I now invite you to address us.
Thank you. Mr. Peter Nichols, National President of United Nations Association of New Zealand, my diplomatic colleague, His Excellency Mr. Tantowi Yahya, Ambassador of Indonesia, Dr. James Waite, from MFAT, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum, good evening, kia ora, koto katoa. Thank you, Mr. Peter, for the kind introduction. Firstly, I would like to thank UNANZ for inviting me to speak at this important discourse today. Congratulations to your team for organizing this diplomatic seminar series. I find this opportunity to be very valuable, especially for the diplomatic community in Wellington, to share about what their respective countries have been doing at the United Nations with a view to contribute to a better world for our future generations. As our world is becoming more polarized at a time when we are all fighting a deadly virus, it becomes more important than ever for us to strengthen our conviction on multilateralism, the spirit of global cooperation and commitment to peace. I'm pleased to note that Malaysia and New Zealand are like-minded partners in this respect. This is why Malaysia continues to view the United Nations as the most capable body to front our collective efforts. It is the only global institution that we all can have a sense of belonging together. After 75 years since its existence, the United Nations is needed now more than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, since becoming the 82nd member of the United Nations on 17 September 1957, less than a month after the Declaration of Independence, Malaysia continues to take active participation in this august body, including by holding the non-permanent seat on the Security Council for 4 terms. In fact, we had the opportunity to work closely with New Zealand when both countries were in the Security Council for the year 2015 to 2016 term. I would love to delve into all of our roles in the United Nations, including its organs, but for the respect of time, I will focus on 2 important scopes that have long-lasting relevance and are deeply embedded in Malaysia's ongoing policy. First, I will talk about the implementations of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 in Malaysia, and afterwards, I would like to shed some light on our contribution to the UN peacekeeping missions. Ladies and gentlemen, when the international community first decided to replace the Millennium Development Goals with the SDG at the Rio +20 summit in 2012, Malaysia has known that its domestic development plans must be tied closely to the SDG 2030, which commenced later in 2016. Malaysia is committed to support and implement the goals as we embark into the next chapter of development towards becoming a high-income nation. The implementation of SDGs is undertaken at the highest level under the SDGs roadmap, approved by the Malaysian Cabinet in September 2016. In the roadmap, Malaysia has established the National SDGs Council, chaired by the Prime Minister, supported by the National Steering Committee, led by the Economic Planning Department, which comprises 5 working committees, namely on inclusivity, well-being, human capital, environment and natural resources, as well as economic growth. As reiterated in the voluntary national reviews presented by Malaysia at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development in New York on 17 July 2017, the SDG principles are embedded in every facet of Malaysia's development plans. Currently, it is being integrated under the implementations of the 11th Malaysia Plan, which started from 2016 to 2020 through the following strategies. First, enhancing inclusiveness towards an equitable society. Second, improving well-being for all. Third, accelerating human capital development for an advanced nation. 4, pursuing green growth for sustainability and resilience. 5, strengthening infrastructure to support economic expansion. And lastly, re-engineering economic growth for greater prosperity. Moving forward, SDG 2030 will continue to be embedded into Malaysia's latest long-term plan of the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, which will be operationalized to the 12th Malaysian Plan for year 2021 to 2025 and the 13th Malaysian Plan from year 2026 to 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, as we progress towards 2030, it is important to take stock of what we have achieved along the journey. I would like, therefore, to share some of Malaysia's achievements on some of the selected SDG, because the complete report, you can always find it online, which is through the voluntary review report that is available on the UN. So on that, I will classify, just highlight a few on the field strategy that we have mentioned on the different cluster. First, on inclusivity, Malaysia have successfully reduced absolute poverty from 49.3% in 1970 to 0.4% in 2016. Incidence poverty improved from 7.6% to 5.6% in 2019. Currently, Malaysia is now focusing on uplifting the quality of life of the bottom 40% of the household, we call it the B40, with the aim to double their monthly income from US $700 in 2014 to US $1,500 by 2020. On goal number 2, Malaysians had achieved 90% reduction of undernutrition, and we have already 90% of the immunization coverage and recorded 50% decline in new HIV cases. Malaysia has also achieved 3.9% yearly growth in major agro-food production. On goal number 5, recognizing the role of women, the Malaysian government has consistently showed its commitment to achieving gender equality and promoting the rights of women and girls by making amendment to Article 8.2 of the Federal Constitution in 2001 to prohibit gender discrimination. Other achievement includes the female labor participation rate has increased to 54.1% in 2015, and the women in decision-making position in the public sector is now stand at 37.1%, while in the private sector is 24.6%. On goal number 9, probably I just skip some of this due to the time. Yeah. Next, on the well-being, we have achieved population by strata in 2019, which is in the urban is 76.2%, while rural is 23.8%. And we also have achieved maternity mortality ratio improved from 29.1% in 2016 to 23.5% per 100,000 live birth. For human capital, our literacy rate has improved from 94.9% in 2018 to 95% in 2019, and also we have recorded increase in the enrollment rate in primary and secondary school to close to more than 90%, and 48% enrollment in the higher education. As for the economic growth, our annual growth rate of real GDP per capita has increased from 3.6% to 3.7% in 2019. 96.3% proportion of the population is now covered by a mobile network in 2018, and individual using internet improved from 81.2% to 84.2%. And also our road network has increased to 58% between 2010 to 2015, thus accelerating the growth of city, urban, and rural areas. Our small and medium enterprises now contributed to 35% of the GDP and 59% of total employment, which is equivalent to 14 million people in year 2015. On goal 17, Malaysia has enhanced active engagement in the South-South cooperation through the Malaysian Technical Cooperation Program and participated in various mechanisms, including NAM, G77, and ASEAN. As for environment and natural resources, we are proudly to mention that Malaysia has now established a total 63 marine protected areas covering 10.4% of the coastal and marine areas, which is now protected. On goal 15, we also have achieved 55.2% of Malaysia's total land area is now covered with forests under various forms of protection, fulfilling the pledge at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro to ensure that at least 50% of our land is covered by forests. On the whole, Malaysia is optimistic that it is on the right track to achieve SDG 2030 alongside other countries. However, we are also cognizant of the overlying challenges and continuously addressing them with appropriate measures. Among others, we are doubling our efforts in the following aspect. First, ensuring the implementation of national policy is reflected at all levels, including at state governments and local council, as well as among the community. Number two, we are tapping into adequate mobilization of substantial amount of domestic and foreign resources. And third, improving coordination between the National Statistics Department and the private sector data provider vis-a-vis validation of non-official data, adequate financing, as well as promoting independence of the National Statistical Department to track progress of SDGs implementation. We strongly believe that SDGs can only be achieved if everyone works in concert and through collective actions. This was clearly demonstrated when Malaysia hosted the SDG Summit 2019 in Kuala Lumpur, where we engaged the stakeholders, NGOs, local governments, private sectors, and academia to increase the awareness of SDG 2030 at the grassroots level. The launching of National SDG Progress Monitoring System in Putrajaya, Malaysia on 15 March 2019 was another remarkable step by Malaysia in implementing SDG 2030. The monitoring system comprises of a blueprint and the National SDG Dashboard, which serve as a one-stop center for dissemination of all SDG-related data. The hosting of a high-level UN side event by Malaysia on the margin of the SDG Summit in New York last year, September, reflected the fact that sustainable development has been at the heart of Malaysia's development approach, with the emphasis on eradicating poverty, improving well-being of people, as well as caring for the environment. In this regard, Malaysia welcomes collaboration with international partners to ensure effective implementation of the SDGs towards making SDG 2030 a success. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to touch on Malaysia's contribution to the UN peacekeeping operations. I decided to share about this because some might not know that Malaysia has been playing an active role in this regard based on its strong conviction in conflict resolution through peaceful means. In October 1960, Malaysia deployed its first contingent of 3,500 Malay Special Forces of the then Malayan Armed Forces to the United Nations operation in Congo. Since then, Malaysia has participated in over 30 peacekeeping operations with the deployment of 29,000 peacekeepers from the Malaysian Armed Forces and the Royal Malaysian Police. The deployment of Malaysian military and police personnel in various UN peacekeeping operations is a manifestation of Malaysia's strong commitment to shared responsibilities towards the early and peaceful resolutions of conflict. In addition to peacekeeping operations, Malaysia has participated in other UN-mandated missions, namely the Implementation Force and Stabilization Force in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the International Force in East Timor, International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan, as well as the International Monitoring Team in Mindanao, the Philippines. Currently, Malaysia is involved in the UN peacekeeping operation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon, Liberia, South Sudan, Darfur, Abya, and Western Sahara. Malaysia has also sent a medical team as part of NATO's operation in Afghanistan. In addition, Malaysia, through the Malaysian Peacekeeping Center, is committed to provide training and capacity building on multi-dimensional peacekeeping for international military, police, and civilian personnel who will be embarking on UN peacekeeping mission in conflict areas around the world. Established in 1996 in Port Dickson with the motto, Partnering for Peace, the Malaysian Peacekeeping Center aims to become the center of excellence for peacekeeping training. The establishment of the MPC reflects the strong national commitment attached by Malaysia towards international peace and security. To date, MPC has conducted more than 90 series of courses for over 2,500 local and international participants from 52 countries. In retrospective, Malaysia's strong conviction to peace was embedded way back when it achieved its independence in 1957. We learned through our experience, and we know that peaceful resolution is the only viable resolution for conflicts. This is why we will remain committed in global peacekeeping efforts and keep contributing to international peace through whatever capacity possible. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my remarks, I wish to reiterate that Malaysia will continue to be an active member of the United Nations. Recently, on 30th September 2020, we signed the instrument ratification of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, becoming the 46th state to have ratified the treaty. It will come into force after a 50th state submit its instrument for ratification to the UN. As we come together to prohibit nuclear weapons, we shall come together to overcome other global challenges of our time. The only viable way for us to do so is through collective efforts, spirit of cooperation, and through the United Nations. I hope you have found this speech to be useful, particularly on our national journey towards achieving SDG 2030 and the involvement of our peacekeepers throughout the globe. Thank you, and I'm happy if you have some questions later. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency. Our final speaker is Dr. James Waite, Unit Manager, South and Southeast Asia Division of New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. James has worked as a career diplomat since 2005. He has served in Washington, DC, has extensive professional experience in Southeast Asia, and was posted to Jakarta 2008-2011. He holds a PhD in the history of United States foreign relations from Ohio University in 2005. In 2012, he published The End of the First Indochina War, A Global History. He speaks Indonesian, and his address in English will cover New Zealand's international involvement and partnership with ASEAN countries, particularly with Indonesia and Malaysia. James, welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, selamat sore. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to take part in this evening's panel alongside Ambassadors Tantowi, Yahya, and Nereza Wong, Choo, and Bapak Peter. And I will, I think, really focus on the wider region, but there will be some good references to Indonesia and Malaysia, two countries we have particularly strong and warm relations with. I commend the association for choosing this theme because of the importance of Southeast Asia to New Zealand. I'll focus my remarks on why New Zealand places a significant emphasis on Southeast Asia through its foreign and trade policies and our development program, before briefly describing some of the key features of our partnership, the how New Zealand works with the 10 states of ASEAN and also with Timor-Leste. I think with limited time, we can save discussion of the many challenges that New Zealand faces with respect to its foreign policy in the region for the question time to come. So first, the why. The SDGs are, of course, a global public good. In essence, they're an updating of the development agenda with a renewed emphasis on sustainability and more equitable outcomes. They're one of a range of high-level declarations on development that New Zealand supports, sitting alongside other commitments we've made bilaterally with ASEAN as a region and in other multilateral forums, such as APEC, among others. I think New Zealand is especially invested in seeing development goals advanced in Southeast Asia because of this region's success, and really its success having significant bearing on our own security and prosperity. In short, New Zealand's geography and long-term trends of growth in Asia dictate that supporting a peaceful and prosperous region simply has to be a major foreign policy objective for New Zealand. And this isn't new. Partnering with newly emerging Southeast Asian states on economic development and security was an important component of New Zealand's foreign policy in the 1950s and 60s. We've been in this game for almost as long as we've had a foreign ministry. And our aid program has its genesis in the Colombo Conference of 1950, with the focus squarely on Asia. Besides Southeast Asia's ongoing peace and prosperity, New Zealand also partners with other governments in support of an open, inclusive and rules-based regional order. And I think this reflects the fact that New Zealand's economic resilience and security ultimately also depends on our ability to remain connected to the region on terms favourable to us. Today, Southeast Asia is a region of huge diversity, where the SDG goals will remain relevant until 2030 and beyond. The region contains one of the world's most economically advanced economies, Singapore, with nominal GDP per capita of over $60,000, which outranks New Zealand and Australia by any financial measure, alongside countries such as Cambodia, Laos, Timor-Leste and Myanmar, each with GDP per capita between $1,000 and $3,000. Within these extremes are the region's middle-income giants, and Ambassador Tantowi spoke about Indonesia's huge scale. Indeed, if it sustains its current growth rates of around 5% real GDP, it may become the 5th largest economy in the world by 2030 and the 4th soon after. It is forecast to have more than 300 million people. Its importance to New Zealand should be self-evident. And of course, I should add, of course, that as the ambassador said, it's a country with a dynamic and vibrant and now consolidated democracy, which New Zealand welcomes. All of Southeast Asia's 3 most populous countries with populations of around 100 million or higher remain eligible for development assistance by our own OECD criteria. This demonstrates that despite the ongoing growth in the region, our largest partners, with economies far larger than New Zealand's, continue to welcome targeted support in various forms. Money, I think, is only one measure of development, and it's an imperfect one. It's worth noting that of the region's poorest countries, Timor-Leste enjoys relatively good security and has established a resilient and vibrant democracy. At risk of being challenged, I will also argue that Southeast Asia, albeit at an elite level, does well in terms of women in leadership positions in ways that transcend national wealth. I raise this because it's important to recognise that New Zealand has significant interest in Southeast Asia beyond crude economic measures. We stand to benefit from a benign security environment, application of the rule of law, and adherence to universal principles of human rights. And both ambassadors talked about the country's respective progress with respect to gender. Economically, the region is one of the fastest growing markets in the world. Southeast Asia therefore plays a significant role in New Zealand's prosperity and our ambitions to grow and diversify our trade. Through COVID, we've witnessed the importance of New Zealand enjoying diverse market access. From an economic perspective, ASEAN represents an economic opportunity and source of resilience. The ASEAN region as a whole is New Zealand's 4th largest trading partner. Total New Zealand exports in 2019 were close to 8 billion. I'll turn now to the how. Some of the main themes and features of our partnerships with Southeast Asia that support the SDGs. The most obvious example of how we partner in the region is through our development program. The aid program provides support to Indonesia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, the Philippines and Timor-Leste. Southeast Asia is the 2nd major recipient of direct New Zealand assistance after the Pacific. All programs run through the recipient country's governments and are consensual. And I'd note that activity is also aligned with ASEAN's own goal to close development gaps within the region. To provide an indication of the scale and a bit of a flavour of how we contribute in this area, I'll just focus on Indonesia for a moment, which is our largest individual program, where New Zealand has invested approximately $62 million for the period 2018 to 2021. The program is, of course, very long running, but it's also agile. So, for example, this year, when a lot of our long-term programs were disrupted by COVID-19, we were able to redirect a lot of funding into COVID-focused activities around testing, PPE, and so forth. We routinely respond to major natural disasters in Southeast Asia using the full range of tools at New Zealand's disposals, including financial contributions, defence assets and specialised expertise. Again, another example from Indonesia is the way we've been able to leverage a lot of our engineering expertise to respond to earthquakes, particularly around assessing buildings for safety. And New Zealand, of course, benefits from reciprocal contributions. I was in Jakarta during the Christchurch earthquake, and we received support from Indonesia and from other Southeast Asian countries at that time. One of our longer term partnerships is the provision of technical assistance in the geothermal sector. This is a good example, and I raise it because we've been doing it since the 1970s. And it's, of course, taken on additional importance today in the context of the search for renewable energy generation, which lower carbon emissions. New Zealand cooperates on projects that also reach directly into impoverished communities. In Timor-Leste, by demonstration, we're the partner of choice for the largest coffee cooperative and have a project to introduce more profitable crops and improve yields with enormous gains for food security, nutrition, and the well-being for very small landholders. I find this program interesting, having spent some time working on it, in that a lot of the expertise isn't delivered by New Zealanders. In fact, you've got a lot of retired Indonesian scientists who previously worked in their national agricultural institutes who have come into Timor and are delivering a lot of their knowledge around cacao and coffee production, which we're supporting financially. So these aid programs are, the most direct and tangible tool that New Zealand uses to support the SDGs. I'd add, however, that the other main New Zealand lever is through our foreign policy, and especially initiatives that support what could be described as the regional order, or alternatively, the region's operating system. This is the network of international agreements, institutions, forums, rules, and norms. The prevailing regional order has a major bearing on the region's security, its prosperity, and New Zealand's ability to access Southeast Asia. This means that we're also working on important development goals with those countries that aren't recipients of development assistance. It's been many years, for example, since New Zealand provided direct assistance to Malaysia, but we retain deep historical ties and work closely with Malaysian colleagues on regional security and economic cooperation, for example, through the Five Powers Defence Arrangement and the region's political and economic architecture. Over the last few years, various governments have described a preference for a free and open Indo-Pacific, with states suggesting core principles that uphold the region's peace, freedom and prosperity. In 2019, ASEAN itself offered an outlook on the Indo-Pacific, suggesting a set of principles that include openness, transparency, inclusivity, a rules-based framework, good governance, respect for sovereignty, non-intervention, complementarity with existing cooperation frameworks, equality, mutual respect, mutual trust, mutual benefit, and respect for international law. Now, I've singled out the ASEAN outlook because of the association's importance for New Zealand's foreign policy. While New Zealand is a dialogue partner of ASEAN and not a member, we have been a strong proponent of the concept of ASEAN centrality and ASEAN cooperation as a mechanism to support peace in Asia and a framework for cooperation. This has served us very well. ASEAN offers us a seat at the table in East Asia, a venue to have our voice heard, and provides an avenue for tangible economic cooperation. We've got an FTA with ASEAN, and we'll soon conclude RCEP, which also revolves around ASEAN as the depository for that treaty, but also includes Australia, Japan, South Korea, and China. To conclude, New Zealand is actively engaged in supporting the delivery of the SDGs in Southeast Asia. We do this in partnership with states in the region, through our development program, but more broadly via our foreign policy, which seeks to uphold an open regional order consistent with New Zealand interests and ASEAN's own vision. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We've now got time for perhaps 10 minutes for question and answer session. If you have a question, if you could please state your name and which of our speakers you would like to have that question answered by. Questions, please. And we might even have some. Do we have any Zoom questions? Oh, lovely. Thank you. Any questions, first of all, from the floor? In that case, I'll take the first one from Kama Bhatta, who is a PhD student at Victoria University. What are the main regional challenges in Southeast Asia that you recognise, and is there any collective effort to tackle that among the ASEAN countries, or at least Indonesia and Malaysia? Would you like to perhaps have the first opportunity to answer that?
What is the question again?
What are the main regional challenges in Southeast Asia? I guess is keep it really simple.
Yeah. Well, ASEAN as the collective nations face several changes from time to time, and the challenges range from the security, economic development, prosperity of the peoples, and a little bit about political issues. I purposely put political issues despite of the so many different colors of ASEAN as a group of country, but nevertheless, issues of politics has not been widely discussed in public. But then, as the main purpose, one of the main purpose of being together in associations called ASEAN is to first create prosperity for the people through economic development. And ASEAN has enjoyed free visa among ourselves, and there is no restrictions or whatsoever. So in terms of economic, we enjoy up to the most right now, but then several projects are still being done in order to create more opportunities for our people. But then, like Dr. James Waite was saying earlier, we also have issues within our group in the ASEAN in terms of economic development level. Not all countries in ASEAN are of the same level, so to speak. You mentioned about Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, but some of the countries also enjoy a different level of economic. And it has become an issue, and it has become homework for the rest of ASEAN countries to develop in the future. Maybe my friend Choo would like to add?
Yeah. Yeah, in addition to what Tantowi have mentioned, I think ASEAN as a big family, usually we work on consensus on a lot of issues. Despite the differences among each individual countries, we try to work under the bigger umbrella as one family, and we always work on consensus. And I think under ASEAN, we are working on the three main pillars now. We are achieving the three cluster on economy, on social and culture, and also political stability on political issue as well. So I think under ASEAN, we also have different sets of measures taken to address to the to achieve the SDG 2030. I think ASEAN is one of the most active regional organization, having the most meeting. If in the normal time, I think it was like 600 over meetings a year, if I'm not wrong, discussing various issues, various projects, leading by different country, because some country will be having how to say, better skill on certain areas, so they will be leading on a different sector. So I think so far, I think we are on track as well. Probably that, because if you ask us on the regional, then we have to prepare on the regional to speak on the ASEAN umbrella instead of individual country.
James, do you want to provide a New Zealand perspective on regional challenges in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, sure. I mean, very quickly, I think the first thing to do is to recognise how far Southeast Asia has come. At the end of the Second World War, it had some of the poorest sort of development levels, you know, totally decimated by that period. And what you have now is an association of countries that are growing, where poverty rates have diminished enormously, and the region is peaceful. And so, you know, people sometimes criticise ASEAN as, you know, a talk shop or lacking the kind of sovereignty sharing mechanisms for the EU, for example, and they miss the fact that what the association has really done is help keep the region peaceful, notwithstanding the fact that there have been quite significant interstate disputes there. And so the fact that it kind of hangs together is just enormously beneficial for New Zealand. And as I said, we're on board with the concept of ASEAN centrality. We recognise that you know, Southeast Asian states formed this collective because they wanted to you know, broker interstate competition themselves. And you know, when others were coming into the region, they wanted to be on ASEAN's terms. For New Zealand, which is a country that believes in rule of law and not just might is right, it's a hugely attractive vision and consistent with our traditional support for multilateral solutions. In terms of the challenges today, you know, they are significant, and we could sit here all night talking about them. But you know, I would say that environmental challenges and climate, you know, has to be, you know, a significant concern. You know, the region is so densely populated. You know, how it can continue to develop sustainably is going to be you know, a big issue.
Thank you. The next question is from Ayu Wulandari, and they ask a question of the Indonesian ambassador. How are the learning systems in Indonesia adjusting to match a rapidly changing world with technological shifts, global integration, and COVID pressures? What can be done to ensure no one is left behind?
Very interesting questions. Education has been the main or the focal points of our government. And it is stated by the largest budget proportions in our national budget dedicated to education. So this is our commitment to always develop, to always improve the quality of our educations amid so many obstacles and shortcomings that we are facing as a country with a very diverse community living in so many different islands. And then the learning process that we learn, especially from a small country like New Zealand, so many things. So we even learn about democracy from New Zealand. So the way how you run your election is very impressive. So we are, like I said earlier, we are the third largest democracy in the world. But in certain issues, we even learn from a small country like New Zealand. What I like from New Zealand is your maturity in democracy. You are very mature in democracy, and I think that one of the very important points that Indonesia should really learn from New Zealand. And talking about what measure that should be done to ensure that no one is left behind, the concept of Indonesia as a country is cooperations. So we promote cooperations with any countries in the world in a lot of issues. And internally, we promote participations. So we ensure that every single people in Indonesia is participating in any single developments which is enforced or taking place in Indonesia. So that's one of our ways to make sure that no one is left behind during the rapid growth of the world in all aspects.
Thank you. And I think having had the good fortune to observe an election in Indonesia, I think New Zealand could learn a lot from Indonesia as well. And I love the transparency approach, which was very evident in Indonesia, where each community would gather once the pollings had closed, and they'd hold up each vote and say, this party is for the wonderful party, and they'd show it to the other candidate. And all the people in the wonderful party go, yay, and then pick up the next one. So I think, Shireen, you had a question.
Am I loud enough?
Yes.
Maybe for the sound for the Zoom people listening in, we might need the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Shireen. I've got a question for Her Excellency, the High Commission of Malaysia. So I'm very fascinated to learn that Malaysia is taking well-being to the next level. So I've got a question around disability. Has Malaysia considered people with disability when it comes to inclusion? That's my take.
Okay, I think issues for the group of disability is actually tackled under the welfare, Ministry of Women, Family Development and Welfare. So we do have a very clear goal, and we try to, of course now we are not doing very well on the disability, especially on infrastructure for the first disability. But in terms of education and how to say professional training, I think we are on track for them, and we try to include them into the workforce. A lot of capacity building program has been prepared for them. In fact, for the government especially, we have set a target that we will have certain percentage of the government, how to say, in the government sector to recruit people with disability. Yeah. Did I answer all? Yeah.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Is it Wendy? We have one more question, please.
Hello, my name is Nikki. Thank you.
Nikki.
Yes, Nikki Lima. My question is, please, with the focus on improving the quality of education, is there a new reprioritization for getting internet access to more people within the country? This question specifically, please, for Mr. Ambassador and for James, is it? If you could just mention about regionally, how MFAT is dealing with that.
For the last 10 years, internet becomes more and more accessible to most of Indonesia. The problem with our country is that those people in the remote areas, like I said, it's a country with 17,500 islands, and the 270 million people of Indonesia live in almost 70% of those islands. So the main problem that we have is the remoteness of the peoples. But then the good news is that we soon will have our own satellite called satellite, I forgot that. This is the issue that I was dealing with when I was in the parliament. Now I forgot the term, I forgot the name. But yeah, we have our own satellite. This is our big effort to ensure that each and everybody in Indonesia is covered by internet, even our people that lives in the eastern parts of Indonesia. We even have a plan with the surplus of internet provisions in the eastern parts of Indonesia, which is very close to the Pacific. We even have a plan to share that with our friends in the island countries in the Pacific. So it's an issue in the past, but now for the last 5 years, the progress has been immense, so to speak. Okay.
James.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very good question, which relates really to people's ability to, access markets and information and addressing disparities. The short answer is in Southeast Asia, it's currently not part of our focus. We do, however, work on this theme a lot in the Pacific. So in Melanesia and Polynesia, we're very actively engaged on the provision of internet service, including submarine cables to reduce reliance on satellites. I would say though, one area where we're engaged in Indonesia quite a bit in the southeast, in places like Maluku, is around renewable energy. And indirectly, that has benefits in terms of abilities people to access information. But that's much more in the, focused on electrification and sustainable electrification in remote areas. Yeah.
If I can add on, Peter?
Please.
All right, Nikki, back to your question. Indonesia is readying its very high throughput satellite called Satria for launch in 2023. The satellite will provide broadband internet service to include free Wi-Fi access to more than 149,000 unserved public service points, including schools, hospitals, and local government locations in some of the least developed regions of Indonesia.
Thank you. And I think, Your Excellency, in Malaysia, I saw one of your slides that reflected something like 100% internet coverage.
Not quite there yet, but we have been having a very heavy investment on improving our internet connection, especially to the rural area in the East Malaysia.
Very high coverage.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings this evening to a conclusion. And first of all, I would like to thank Parliament and the Inter-Parliamentary Relations for allowing us the use of this facilities, and also for the refreshments which we can enjoy after this. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge Wendy's efforts in providing the facility or enabling us to take place, and also the IT support from the staff here. So it's been wonderful in collecting with our Zoom friends out there. I'd also like to acknowledge Waite in your efforts in pulling this together. This is the first in a series of roughly once a quarter. We hope to have presentations from the diplomatic community talking to us about their engagement with the United Nations. Of course, we also welcome post-election cross-party parliamentary engagement with the diplomatic community on global issues. At the United Nations Association of New Zealand, we look forward to seeing MPs at future events like this one. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we've been very privileged to hear the thoughts of three astute commentators and practitioners in diplomacy and their involvement with the United Nations and its key focus areas, not the least of which is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think, again, there's some lessons there for New Zealand. And I was absolutely thrilled to see in the two diplomatic presentations just the very high level in Malaysia at which the SDGs are coordinated at government level, and exactly the same with you being a living example of having that responsibility as an MP within Indonesia. That high level political coordination is something that a lot of commentators in New Zealand see as lacking. I thank each of you for your perspectives and insight in making this evening the informative event that it's been, and furthering our goal of promoting engagement with the United Nations. This event continues the pursuit of that goal. We warmly welcome new members to the association with our 7 branches nationwide. And if you haven't joined and would like to, then please visit our UNANZ, UNANZ website. Earlier on this evening, I gave a whakatauki and said that I would give the translation at the end of this evening's event. And I think it is most apt for this particular engagement. And the whakatauki says this: through listening comes awareness. Through awareness comes understanding. Through understanding comes knowledge. And through knowledge comes well-being. And we noticed that well-being in your presentation tonight. So that concludes this event, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming along. Thank you to our Zoom people who've Zoomed in, and we look, please enjoy the refreshments afterwards. Thank you very much. Yeah.